Hey people, what's up? K-Hart here. So I recently posted a poll on my channel of what y'all would want to see, and a tutorial on how to make better chords and progressions is the one that got the most votes, so that is what we're going to do today. So I'm going to do a little bit of music theory, a little bit of kind of creating chords and progressions from scratch if you don't know any music theory. So yeah, hopefully this is helpful, and let's hop right into Ableton. Okay, so before we dive into making full-on chord progressions, if you know nothing about music theory, let me just show you the easy formula if you want to make any major or minor chord on the piano. So the formula for any major chord, let's just say we want to make a C major chord. We're going to start with our root note, and that's our first note. And we'll call that 0. If we want to make a major chord, we're going to count up 1, 2, 3, 4 and put a note there, and that's going to be our major third. We go up 1, 2, 3 more, and that's our fifth. So this is a C major triad, and it's called a triad because it only has 3 notes in it, and it's pretty much the most simple form of a chord you're going to get. So 0, 4, 3, and that's your major chord. Minor chord is going to be really similar. So let's get rid of these. We're going to start on C again, except this time we're going to count up 1, 2, 3, and put a note there. That's going to be our minor third. And then we're going to count up 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's going to be our fifth. And that's our minor chord. So really easy formula to remember if you don't have something like this nice scale function that Ableton has, or if you're just, learning on the piano. Basically 0, 4, 3 for major chords, 0, 3, 4 for minor chords. All right, so I went ahead and drew out all of the chords in the A minor scale, and I'm sure if you have been looking into chord progressions or making chord progressions at all, you've seen numbers pop up, so like a 2-5-1 progression or 1-6-5-4, something like that. And basically, those correspond to the numbers within the scale. So a 1-6-5-4 would be the 1 chord, the 6, the 5, and then the 4. And that's basically an easy way to create a progression. But what's important to know about these different chords is kind of the different qualities they have. So really briefly, the 1 chord is always going to be called a tonic. And the tonic is basically home base. It's kind of where everything wants to resolve to. And that's why a lot of chord progressions either begin and or end on the tonic chord. All right, so move to our 2 chord, which in a minor scale sounds kind of gross because it's our diminished chord. And this is basically because we have 2 minor thirds stacked on top of each other. So important thing to keep in the back of your mind, if you're in a minor scale, 2 chord is probably not a great choice for chill music. We have our 3 chord, our 4 chord, which is called a subdominant chord. And basically this one kind of wants to lead toward our 5, which is called a dominant chord. And our dominant chord is basically going to be the chord that has the most tension in it. And a lot of times it wants to resolve back to that tonic or 1 chord. We have our 6 chord and our 7 chord. The 7 is also a nice choice to lead back to our 1 chord because we have our 7th note, which is also called a leading note or a leading tone. And basically, it's a nice resolve back. Okay, so now we know about how the numbers work in terms of chords in the scale and what some of the functions are or the qualities are of some of these chords. So I went ahead and wrote out a simple progression. So this is a 1, 6, 3, 7 progression. And without changing anything, this is what it sounds like. Okay, so doesn't sound bad. It also really doesn't sound that great. And a lot of that reason is because these chords are so just distant from each other. And the best way to think about this, and probably the best way to improve your chords overall, is something called voice leading. And basically, the easiest way to put it is instead of thinking about chords vertically as this stack of notes, we want to look at each note in the chord individually and see where it's going to move or progress to in the next chord. And basically we want to minimize this movement. So if we look at what we have now, just these top notes, we have this E jumping all the way up to the C, down to the G, up to this D. That's a lot of movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert some of these chords. And inversions are basically just moving some of the notes around. You can actually change what chord it is by doing this. Usually a standard inversion would be moving a note from the bottom up an octave, but we can also move these down. So we don't need to get too bogged down in the theory part of it. I'm just going to show you. We'll move these two down in octaves. So now we have these following each other. If we look here, now we have this nice step. So the E to the F to the G. And then I'm going to go ahead and we'll move both of these down and see what we have here. So let's listen to this again. Okay, so it already sounds a lot better. It sounds a lot smoother, a lot more polished. And the next thing we can do if we want to jazz this up a little bit more is add some extended chords. And once you have this scale function enabled, if you have this, it's basically you skip every other note in your scale, and that's going to be the next note in your chord. So now we have an A minor 7 chord. And the easiest way for me when I'm kind of finishing off progressions or adding notes is I like to just go back to that voice leading that I just talked about and just find where is going to be a nice way for these notes to flow into each other. So if we look at what we have now, it looks like everything has, pretty minimal movement, and it's kind of going in this nice up and back down movement. So if we play this now, let's see how it sounds. All right, so that sounds pretty good. Sounds a lot better than where we first started. Let's do another progression, and I will show you guys a different trick that I like to use when I'm starting from scratch. All right, so this is a simple progression I just recorded on my keyboard, and just really quickly, these are both the same triad that I used. A nice way to kind of switch it up is to change the bass notes underneath those triads. So the A flat and the C, the G and the B, and if you can see the pattern here, we're following that downward progression. So again, voice leading, super important, and it's definitely going to make your chord progressions better. All right, I think that's going to do it for this one. I will be back next week with more beats. As always, if you made it this far and you enjoyed, please remember to hit that like button. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. I really appreciate it. I put a lot of time and effort into these videos and really trying to grow the channel. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.